The Grand Museum VR seemed to offer an interesting virtual reality museum experience. It offers 82 models of real-world art from the ancient worlds, and they're broken into 4 different time periods. You've got the ancient Greek and Roman section, the ancient Egyptian section, an ancient Asian art piece section, and a post-classic era European section. And the idea is that you can wander around each of these areas, or the entire museum as a whole, looking at the different sculptures. But the real fun of it is then going into seeing the individual structures uniquely from different scaled perspectives. Now, these appear to have been scanned and then put into the game themselves, and whilst they do have usually a good high level of quality scanning, the ability to be able to actually get and move around these structures is where the Grand Museum utterly falls down. The movement in this game is absolutely atrocious, and it requires the use of your controller to kind of move and nod around, and you have to tilt your head on the PSVR version to kind of get yourself vaguely into the right space. But it's a real wrestle to understand how things are going. The other problem is that when you're looking at all of these different sculptures in different scales, you're in this just infinite dark area, which is great for illuminating the actual structures themselves, but all of the written kind of historical context is then splurged on a wall in really poorly optimized text, so you can't really read stuff properly from afar, but then if you're too close up it gets blurry, and then you have to kind of scan your head really around in awkward ways to deal with it. So it becomes a real chore to move around the Grand Museum. When it then gets into what's called the archive section, when you're able to move around and see everything kind of all together rather than it being broken into different sections, that's fine. But again, the actual movement is atrocious, so you end up like inside various different pieces, or like splattered up against a wall, and then you're trying to contort yourself into all these weird positions to get yourself back out again, and it just became an exercise in frustration. That, alongside the fact that there is very little else going on apart from just looking at the sculptures and trying to read this blurred text, means that it's very difficult to recommend the Grand Museum, even for people who are like real museum aficionados or people that like historical artifacts. So I would probably recommend it a little bit more as a learning tool than an actual enjoyable experience, but even from that perspective it's quite limited, because in some areas the context is really small. In some other areas actually there's quite a lot and wall-to-wall of context, and I was like, yeah, this actually is interesting if I could read the thing. So yeah, a real lesson in frustration here for this game. Do not personally recommend it. Maybe for a small niche audience that wants to dive into things, great, but yeah, avoid.